Uma universidade conectada com o seu tempo, com a ciência e com a formação humana. A Universidade de Caxias do Sul é uma universidade comunitária que tem como missão produzir, sistematizar e socializar o conhecimento com qualidade e relevância para o desenvolvimento sustentável. Conectada com você, sua vida e seus sonhos. Cerca de 100.000 pessoas levam no seu currículo o nome da Universidade de Caxias do Sul. Mas o legado de uma universidade não pode ser só medido pelo número de pessoas que ela formou, mas também pelos conceitos e ideias que ela ajudou a revolucionar, pelas empresas que ajudou a implantar e até mesmo pelos sonhos que ela ajudou a concretizar. A marca da UX ultrapassou as barreiras do tempo e os limites do espaço. Ela está impressa em milhares de histórias e conquistas e segue sua trajetória de sucesso, preparando pessoas com capacidade para transformar o mundo, criar o novo e antecipar o futuro. Universidade de Caxias do Sul.
Hello, everybody. I hope that we are online and that you can follow this session. In my screen, I still have the presentation of the University of Caxias do Sul. And I'm not quite sure if I'm
There you are.
Here we are. This is the first session on the fourth day of a very intensive conference week of the Knowledge Cities World Summit. And the afternoon and evening session, from my point of view, it's from the European time scale. We would like to introduce the famous book which has been mentioned so many times during this conference, or the two famous books, I need to say. And I would start with giving Javier, who is the main editor of both books, the first word to give a short introduction of on this project. Javier.
Thank you, Günter. Hello, everyone. Well, in a few words, basically, what I would like to share is the meaning, the significance of these two books, not just as relevant publications by themselves, but basically as the flags of a movement that the World Capital Institute is getting immersed into. You know, the World Capital Institute traditionally has dealt with two major issues: a more foundational and abstract scientific one of knowledge-based development, and the more applied, practical, down-to-earth one of knowledge cities. Over the years, those were the two tracks along which the World Capital Institute's work on research and consultancy and development and scientific productions and so forth were evolving. But along the years, we were first concerned with the issues of whether the economic establishment, the economic culture that surrounds our life was the most adequate to contain these ideas of knowledge-based development and knowledge cities. And therefore, we became increasingly engaged with the ideas of alternative economic cultures, which includes both alternative economic thinking and alternative economic doing. Once there, we also became increasingly aware of the concepts, of the constraints of the very concept of development, since it is so closely related to the Western European economic culture that was the basis of the colonial expansion and its current forms of domination. We were increasingly concerned as well whether we needed to look into, open up our horizon to alternative economic thinking and doing. And already there, this was about some 6-7 years ago, this was like the door through which we entered the realities of what is perhaps the most pressing reality of our days, the Anthropocene. And we realized that we needed to evolve our work from knowledge-based development into knowledge for the Anthropocene, the subject of the first volume, and the work on knowledge cities into city preparedness for the climate crisis, the content of the second volume. So this is why the books are the flags signaling a whole strategic approach for the World Capital Institute and the whole international community of knowledge-based development and knowledge city to move and advance and contribute in that new direction. I'll leave it there.
Okay, thank you, Javier. When the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, were first time introduced, I was wondering, together with colleagues, why there is not an 18th box indicated as knowledge for the future. As a matter of fact, in having had many discussions, I found out that the authors of the SDGs were convinced that knowledge is something you need in any of the 17 areas which are indicated. So knowledge is something which goes across all the many disciplines. And I'm happy that the World Capital Institute I'm a member of has decided to leave its tradition, not to leave really, but to apply knowledge to a specific area of concern of these days, which is how to manage the future in entering a new age in Earth time, which is called the Anthropocene. It has been mentioned several times over this conference what it is. Now, having compiled this book was a huge task. I have really to be grateful to Javier that he took that job on him, as well as on this and the second book. It was, as much as I remember, at least half-year work or even more. And we had a lot of fun also to collect these different contributions, which we will address by today. As Javier already said, the book is organized in 8 chapters, where we start with a general discussion on the planetary emergency. Then we go into the literacy issues. What do you need to read by today in order to get a little bit through the subject? Then how humans respond on the current situation in entering the Anthropocene. And as Javier was mentioning, alternative economic cultures, which is one of the major concerns for the World Capital Institute. And I may announce on this occasion that we will open several platforms in future, where one of the platforms will be for the discourse on new economic models, which we feel is an urgency to be addressed. Then the book goes on with talking about justice in the Anthropocene. I personally must say that this was the one chapter which I was most fascinated about, because I was taught that our approach, the Western Christian, you may call, approach in organizing our life and in specific science is incomplete as long as we do not introduce let's say, methods and thinkings from other cultures, and specifically the African and Far East thinking, I think has so far been exempted from the discussion, and I'm happy to see that this book also tries to include it. And another perfectly different aspect, but close to my heart and close to my thinking and our thinking, is knowledge for the Anthropocene from the perspective of art. I consider art to be an inspirational momentum tool, which opens up new spaces for our discussions. And I would foresee that in the future of the World Capital Institute, we will much more integrate artists. And we already started to have this aspect in our book. And finally, knowledge transfer, how is it organized in the future? Knowledge transfer for the Anthropocene. Now, let me give a last remark. What I was very much hit by reading again through the foreword and the introduction having been written by Javier, that evidently it's not just it's not just sufficient to use classical approaches in doing science. We rather are looking forward to a perfectly new way. And it's not just only as the publisher of this book. By the way, it's a fake version which I prepared. It's empty. I also should show that it's empty. But this is the good story about it, that it's empty because it has to be written. And that's what I meant by we have to take new approaches in how to develop knowledge and how to apply knowledge. I think what I learned from rereading some of the introductions and forewords is that we are still somehow caught in a traditional way of looking at the things. And when I showed this book for the reasons that the publisher gave it the title, a multidisciplinary approach. I think multidisciplinarity, of course, we need it. We need to have most different disciplines to be integrated, but that's already something which we would have claimed 40 years ago. We are looking for not even transdisciplinary approaches, rather than to completely new ideas. Reading through the different chapters and the book, I must even say that one discovery I made, I should say, just by today in preparing this session, that we have a lot of new terminology. By the way, this is also addressed in this book. And to me, a new term for indicating a new thinking is also a kind of an indication that a subject is getting started to be better understood. Now, the multitude of different terminologies which we are using today indicates to me that we are not yet and far away from having a complete understanding how this new way of creating knowledge and applying knowledge to the Anthropocene must be thought through. I'm happy that by today I organized this session in a way that I invited one of the authors, who is Daniel Dahn, because he is one of those people who also in the course of this conference already started to give us indications that we need to have a new approach in both methodologically as well as in the way we communicate and how we develop the future all together in co-developing and co-thinking how this new approaches for mastering the Anthropocene must be organized. So Suellen or the support from the conference organization, could we take in Daniel for his contribution, please? As long as this is the case.
Thank you very much.
Daniel, I don't need to introduce you. You are already a well-introduced member of this conference. Please take your time to give a comment on what I was discussing before.
Thank you very much, Günter. Thank you, Javier, and all the participants, and mostly to the audience that we all cannot see, because unfortunately we have to keep the conference virtually due to the pandemic situation. And I have to say that I had a very inspiring week with you all, even if I would have preferred to join that conference closer to you and being able to visit Mexico for the first time in my life, because, and I want to start shortly with that, Mexico played a role in my scientific development, even if that was not the reason why I'm here and why I wrote together with Günter Koch an article for the already mentioned book, Knowledge for the Anthropocene. I want shortly to describe why Mexico was important for me, because I don't have to say anything else for the moment on my vita. When I was in the year 2000 on the Stockholm University, and there on the academy, where year per year the Nobel Prize is given to physicists, biologists, and scientists from different fields, I met a Mexican scientist, which name is in the moment not present in my mind. I will have a look. Maybe it comes up again. But I was just finishing my master I did finished 4 years ago my master's thesis in West Africa on land degradation and on subsistence economy. And I was focusing small-scale agriculture, villages, and small entrepreneurs in Senegal, Gambia. And I was watching how do they interact with their natural environment. My focus was an ecological economy. And Günter and me, we were speaking and writing in our article on an economy for sustainability. And that is more or less a big frame also of that interesting multidisciplinary publication of this book. And what are the target processes, and what are the targets and also the instruments that we will need to achieve an economy for a full world. And when I was working in Mexico in West Africa on these topics, interviewing a lot of villagers and local people from different indigenous societies, what is their idea of consume? They all said, in fact, we are rich. We own our time. We own our work. We own our fields. We are working in our own traditions, and we are in very close cooperation with all others. We are mastering our world. We have just a lack on material stuff, on good tools, on good organic fertilizer. We have a lack of water. The drought is too much, and we have a problem with land degradation. So it means we have too much work to do. So I found out that the models of wealth and the models of societal development and the understanding what makes me rich, what makes me happy, are differing strongly from the Western European, US American minted ways of life and consume that were transported and globalized over the last decades, and today no one is questioning them anymore. So I was talking on these topics in Stockholm in the year 2000. And then a man appeared, a professor from Mexico, and his name was, and I have it now in mind, David Barking. David Barking, Professor David Barking. I think he must be very old now. He was 20 years ago in his early 70s. And and I met him a bit drunken because we had to share the same hotel room in the Nobel Prize Academy. And he appeared in the middle of the night when I wanted to sleep already. And then he waked me up and he asked me, "Oh, where is my bed? And where's the blanket? And where can I wash my teeth?" And then we started to talk in the middle of the night. And he told me he was already working in the 70s on indigenous economies and on the interrelation between indigenous knowledge and modern economic development. And he was very happy and surprised that he met a very young scientist to that time who was working on a very similar perspective in West Africa, and we met in Sweden. And the name of the conference was Challenges for the 21st Century. And so now we are in the first quarter of the 21st century, at the end of the first quarter already, and we know that the need for a new economic thinking and for new economic methodologies, a new understanding of progress and growth is more urgent than it was ever before. And especially that is the occasion, the reason why Günter and Javier brought this publication on its way and brought together people from all over the world who are taking their very personal and individual perspectives from their scientific point of view on the need for a new economic, cultural, and societal models for the Anthropocene. And what is the Anthropocene? The Anthropocene, and I'm a geoscientist, is a symbol for the time when the species Homo sapiens became the most dominant species on our planet Earth. And we can see that in the geological stratospheres. And we can see it in the accumulation of plastic, the accumulation of beton and of solid building materials, in the accumulation of concrete. Yes, thank you. In the accumulation of nuclear waste in certain areas. And we know today that probably in some 100 million years, if we look back as geologists, probably not as Homo sapiens anymore, maybe a kind of alien octopus will visit our planet and then ask himself, oh, what was happening there? There were some dinosaurs 400 million years ago or 300 million years ago. And then there is a very thin layer where I see an accumulation of something that appears to be something like poison, like toxic stuff, like stuff that is not very complementary to the development of biological life. And what kind of species, how could that happen? Probably normally a biological species, they don't produce waste. Waste is something that doesn't exist in nature. So in nature, everything becomes more or less let's say, the value base for the next development stage. And from the microorganisms up to the modern towns and cities and urban settlements of the human species, we normally we are closing the loop of the ecological value chain. And for us humans, it seems a bit inadequate how we act, because we are closing the loop to support a society and a planet Earth perfectly made for jellyfish. Unfortunately, we are not jellyfish, and we have something that we call intelligence, but we are on a very, very primitive level still. So now it's a question, what is the search movement and what are our opportunities that we have? And we know, to close shortly this sentence, Günter, just 1 second. And we know that economic models, economic practices, and methods are man-made. They are not given to us as society, as culture, as consumer models. And for that, this book delivers a lot of approaches, and I could dive now into some of these articles, but I give over back to Günter.
Thank you very much, Daniel. I was just worried that you would disclose too many secrecies from the book in your perspective. What is collected there? As I said at the very beginning, I'm happy that you, as an author, have given us such a broad view on what is in that book. And now I would like to switch to or add to Sylvain as the fourth participant in our round, because Sylvain does not know what is in that book. He has certainly not read any of the contributions, but I made him a little bit getting some appetite on maybe not reading the full book, because that's nearly impossible with 400 pages. Rather than he may select some of the articles which he is very interested in, and now I would call, if that's possible, by the management of the session to get Sylvain in. Sylvain.
Yes, here I am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Hello to all the listeners, and thank you, Günter, for having invited me to give some feedback on the expectation that a potential reader might have of your book. Because, of course, I understand that the main subject, knowledge for the Anthropocene, is meant to bring triggers into how can we get out of this mess, basically. So my main expectation is that it can help me or readers to learn, but also to unlearn and to relearn. So that the book can be something on this path, because I think that as long as we won't get, and Daniel was already mentioning it, economic systems are man-made. They stem not from nature. As long as we don't get to a mindset shift, we won't get out of this, even if we put in new systemic regulators or whatever it is. And so as long as the metaphors that are underlying our worldviews will not change as well, we will have trouble into getting knowledge into the Anthropocene as it is promoted by the book. That's also why I think that this idea of opening up our knowledge space and our learning space on the one side, to the many different indigenous wisdoms that there are around the world, and Daniel was also already touching on it, but also, and something what is more and more happening these days, especially after the pandemic and with climate change hitting harder in a very short time, which is a lot more need for foresight, for future thinking. Because what you're doing there is that you are creating different imaginary pictures, images of the future, from which you can learn from, because you are starting to consider those possibilities, good ones, bad ones, and this helps you to learn in the present and to bring novelty into the present, combined with indigenous knowledge. I think that can be really a way in bringing a new type of knowledge into the Anthropocene. At the end, I'm also asking myself, is it knowledge for the Anthropocene, or for saving the Anthropocene, or for getting out of the Anthropocene? But that's another philosophical question.
Thank you, Sylvain, for your short introduction. I don't want to overstress the time we have available. It's a rather short session, because we will have a next session also on the second book, led by Cathy Garner. But I see that Daniel wants to give a comment. Daniel?
Yes, I just wanted to maybe add something a bit concrete, a bit practical. And if you like, Günter, I would like to have 1 minute to sketch out some framing needs that are targeting in direction of a sustainable, a life-serving socioeconomic model for the future that is aligned for sure with many of the ideas of Friday for Future and of the needs of the ecological crisis we are facing. If that is appreciated, I would do that in something like 1 to 2 minutes.
Okay, 1 to 2 minutes. Granted.
Okay, so good. I just look at the watch. I just lost 5 seconds. We have to accept that a market economy that is the big economic paradigm that is worldwide accepted and in a permanent negotiation is existing since thousands of years on our planet Earth. A market economy is something that is permanently discussed between all the actors that are part of this market. And the market is always pluralistic. It is always connected to unpaid and to paid work. It contains private goods and common goods. But we always have to know that everything what happens on a market, on a planetary level, cannot be owned by someone individual. It cannot be owned by a small group of people. In fact, our planet Earth is the planetary common that we as humans share together, and the same is our culture. And the same is the market itself. The market is a common. It's a shared good. And it's a shared good that is in permanent transformation and permanently reconstructed by human ideas. And for that, it is important that we keep the balance between private and common interests, between our present needs and our future demands, and that we understand ourselves not only in an individual, egoistic and personal way, that we understand ourselves as performative individual parts of a specimen, and the specimen is called Homo sapiens, and we are in an evolutionary process. We are not the top level of evolution. We are in a permanent learning process, and that we are now facing a global identity, and that we are now and today having the understanding that there's a global humankind existing with a lot of different approaches working for a shared planet Earth, that is something very new. And this gives us the big chance to understand ourselves as empathic and peaceful, just, and I can call based on love-driven individuals striving for a fair and just future for all of us in diversity and individuality, but also in a shared cooperative planetary space. And we can change it. We are not lost.
In order to close this part of the session, as I said, for the newcomers in this session, there will be a second part being guided by Cathy Garner. I would like to get back to the book, let's say philosophy. And as you pointed out, well, Daniel, as well as Sylvain, this is the beginning of a journey. This is not a kind of a definite, let's say, compilation of statements made by very intelligent and very intellectual contributors, authors of this book, rather than they give different spotlights on the subject we start to understand, but we by far have not yet the complete understanding. For closing this part of the session, I would like to quote Noel Castry. Noel Castry is a professor in Manchester. I think he's also a geoscientist, so a colleague, more or less, Daniel, of you. And he was invited, and he gratefully accepted to write the foreword to this book. And I think he made a very good remark, and that is the closing remark also for this session. He says that the chapters of this book cannot provide definitive answers to the profound issues they explore. They, meaning the authors and the articles, but they can help us on the journey towards a knowledgeable response to the epic changes human activity has unintentionally instigated. The journey will be incredibly arduous. Unspeakable harm will be inflicted. Naive hope will be trampled under the weight of too many unwelcome events, but the journey may also bring the very best out of people. We desperately need a kinder, more cooperative, more reflective society to emerge from the rubble of neoliberal globalization. And I think this last hint exactly meets what you were saying before, Daniel, that we have to overcome the current predominant economic framework and rules. And we certainly need to have also some new thinking in that strategy. And I'm happy if this book would find sufficient many readers and students and professors who could take parts out of it in order to fuel this discussion, which we from the World Capital Institute certainly will continue over the next years. Thank you very much for this part of the session. And then we now move over. Maybe Javier, you want to give some introductory word in order to introduce Cathy, because we're now changing to the second book.
Well, thank you everyone on this first panel, Sylvain, Daniel, and Günter, and we now move to the second part of this endeavor, which is this editorial program. We're moving along two tracks. The first one, again, more foundational knowledge for the Anthropocene. The second one, much more grounded in terms of city preparedness for the climate crisis. Cathy, delighted as always to have you with us both in sharing this session and of course in having co-edited this wonderful volume, which by the way,
yes,
learned this morning, we learned that it's also being published
today.
Just today. So good news. We're with you, Cathy.
Thank you. Fabulous news, Javier. Thank you very much. And to prevent any problem with my slides, which is always a challenge, I'm going to really talk through the book and my reflections from the book, not give the detail, but take you through a bit of the book and the structure. And as you've said, Javier, the foundational knowledge in K4A, this is city preparation for the climate crisis. This is more grounded in real life experience for now, and brings up the challenges and the good things that are happening on the ground. So first of all, Raphael, could you just open up my slides, please? Thank you. Fingers crossed. If not, nope. I can try and share my slides. Well, if not, I'll talk through it. Okay. Oh. Nope.
They're dealing with it.
There you go. I apologize. Anyway, before we start, what I'd love to say is that it was an absolute pleasure to work with Javier as a co-editor of this book. And I'd like to thank each and every one of the contributors who were wonderful colleagues to work with. And I think I'd like to thank Edward Elgar, because they proved to be really supportive publishers. And we got a really great support from them. If I had my second slide, I would be showing something which actually thanks one of our colleagues, Tatiana Schreiner, who is the force behind this book and did all of the really hard work. To gather all the wonderful contributors. Javier, you will understand the notes. So are we seeing it or not? Should I try to share my screen?
You carry on. They seem to be dealing with it. So if they manage to sort it out, we will.
I did send them a PDF.
Carry on. Yeah.
Let me see if I can share my screen.
Or I could try, if you want me to share the index, the table of contents of the volume, and you may and I follow you. If that's an option.
I will try to share the second screen that I have here. If it's not going to work, I don't think. Oh. No. Okay. Okay. Well, I can talk it through if we can't get the slides. I think it's coming in just a minute. They've got a connection problem. I wanted to really start, apart from saying how much I'd learned from this book, on the complexities and the varieties of problems that we face now and in the future. And given the word preparedness comes into the title, I would say that perhaps the conclusion, sadly, is that we are not ready. We are not adequately prepared. But I saw some very hopeful signs in the book that much action is being taken, and many cities are beginning to bring their resources together. But this, of course, may be too late, because we are in real and present danger from climate change. The book effectively presents, as the previous one, a multidisciplinary perspective. It has some 50 contributing authors from over 15 countries. That is amazing and really terrific. It presents many different angles on a very, very complex subject. And of course, the challenges in the cities are now on familiar words: adaptation, which is about adjusting to the, here we go. Wonderful, thank you. Raphael, there is the dedication to Tatiana. We're on this slide, that's, thank you. We're on this next slide now, thank you. Brilliant, thank you very much. So adaptation, the process of adjustment, mitigation by cities to reduce greenhouse gases and other trials that we have. But really importantly, to discover the unexpected and also the predicted social and political implications. And above all, my hopefulness came from the local exemplars of action that we were able to see. The book, however, is not a scientific assessment of the threats. There are many other volumes out there that can do this. Of course, it mentions those threats. It's not either a prescription for cities. As we know, each city is very different. Context is everything, and not all cities are equal or similarly equipped to even begin to think about coping with the threats from our climate crisis. And, you know, it is not a comprehensive solution. As we've said through the other book, this is the beginning of a journey. This is a start. And I think we saw many different angles in the book, which are hopeful signs of where we can actually work together. Could we have the next slide, please? Okay, there are 7 sections, each with 4 distinct contributions. I won't spend a lot of time on this. You can see them there. And I've pulled some of them together, and I will talk through some of my reflections from reading this in several times now, because I've really found it incredibly enlightening, incredibly instructive. Next slide, please. Okay, and one of the most fabulous things is that here are the authors from chapter 1. Amazing. People from Denmark, from Oxford, I'm sorry, Belina, Oxfam International, and from the USA. So a real range of viewpoints on these issues. And we had Leilani last night speaking in another seminar there from Georgia. Really, really interesting. Thank you. Next slide, please. So vulnerabilities. What on earth does vulnerability actually mean? And how many assortments of vulnerabilities are there? We just need to look at these events, these pictures of the events in Chennai. In one case, we have run out of water. We have a drought. On the other hand, we have too much water and we are flooded. And this is the change of the weather and the different contexts that cities are actually facing. This is the same city. 1 minute, they're queuing for water. The next minute, they are wading through water. This is really complicated. And it's what comes up in the book several times. This complexity is what people are calling a wicked problem, and are really challenging that complexity. Above all, people's vulnerability creates the conditions for harm. And it's not just about the immediate harm from either being out of water or being in too much water. They have cascading impacts, because if you were in Chennai, would you think about moving? Would there be a mass migration from here? And some of our chapters chart that mass migration. And the chapters from the Oxfam readers on disaster show that this is real, and the barriers that we find in dealing with these challenges are real and manifest themselves absolutely in disaster situations. These can be overcome through coordination and collaboration, but coordination and collaboration seems to be something which is the big thing that is lacking and is highlighted in many of the chapters. Now, Could I have the next slide, please? And this is where I would like to, if I have time, to show a 5-minute film. You're going into it. Can you wait until I just introduce it? You may have seen the heading which says this is a digital twin. Probably you're thinking, what on earth is a digital twin? Well, I was thinking the same before I went to this fascinating presentation just a few weeks ago by Arup in City Planners in the UK and the University of Cambridge. Essentially, it's about taking our essential infrastructures, the electricity, the digital connection, the water, the power, and building a system that aids our cities to have resilience. And we model it in cyberspace. And then if there is a disaster, we are able to cope with it. This is a story of this young man and his grandfather. It is a very British film, and I apologize if the not so much the vocabulary, but the accents are quite challenging. But I found it incredibly moving, and I hope you will find the same. Could you play that now, please? Thank you.
After an extremely wet weekend, so flooding in some areas, millions will have to endure more intense downpours due to the storms.
Deadly flooding across America's northeast. President Joe Biden said it was yet another reminder that these
A flood warning has been declared for parts of the UK as Storm Ruby arrives on our shores.
authorities say you should limit travel wherever possible.
I've heard it all now. Limit travel over a bit of bad weather. Some of the top that.
No, I didn't.
Don't believe everything you hear.
Why do you watch it then?
What?
Well, why do you watch it then?
Which are all bloody channels these days.
What if you get flooded?
I'm not a flood risk here.
Says who?
Well, Roy off at road for one.
What, Roy over at Road who believes in Bigfoot and UFOs?
Oh. Yeah, why are you still here? I thought you were going out with your mates.
Maybe I should stay here.
On my account. Go on, get off with it, you'll be late.
Right. See you soon.
Yeah. Have a pint for me.
David Hughes.
David, this is Clara Richardson from the Digital Twin Engineering team. We spoke last week.
Yeah, we did.
I was wondering if you'd come to a decision about what we last discussed. Like I said before, we need to create a digital twin of the whole network to identify possible failures across the system. We need all of the utilities to participate.
Sure.
This is about keeping the power on and services running through extreme weather events. We've got the tech. We just need to share data across our organisations.
I absolutely understand, but you requested confidential asset data from us. Data licensing processes are complex.
Oh no. Come on.
But we currently have our own emergency systems in place anyway. We are taking responsibility for this.
Look, for this to work, we need to connect the entire system together. Not only is this about businesses and services staying online, it's a matter of life and death. It's that critical.
Yeah, we have a whole list of critical priorities.
Storm Ruby is due to hit. It's going to be catastrophic. Is there anything we can do to speed this process up?
It could take 6 months, a year even.
Storm Ruby, this is climate change.
I understand.
My mother lost her home during the floods last year. We've got to do everything we can. David? Hello?
Listen, Clara.
Günter!
I'll make it work. We're in now.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's been 1 week since Storm Ruby hit the UK. With the worst of the bad weather now behind us, the great cleanup has begun. Scientists say many
No
lives
slippers.
were saved through the use of new technology.
Carbon neutral then.
Data, but they warn there's
Roy's got some and all.
still to be done. Experts.
We are in a climate emergency and it affects all of us, especially the most vulnerable. But all is not lost if we adapt and make better climate resilience decisions. The National Digital Twin Programme is developing a connected digital twin called Credo, which is making connections across our utility networks in a way that could save lives in the future. But this will only happen if we share data between organisations. Collaboration is key to tackling climate change. We must act now.
Thank you, Raphael. If you can close that now, that's wonderful. I hope that you found that as interesting as I did. I mean, it really is quite poignant that and leads into our pioneer movements for city preparedness, which is the following slide. The one thing was that Grandad really didn't believe that we have got climate change on our doorstep, on his doorstep. And for me, one of the most poignant moments in the COP26 that I've been following was the fact that vulnerability is a word, but it can be existential. When a delegate from the Maldive Islands said, "This is words to you, but here in the Maldives, it's death for us and our country." So the seriousness of this has become ever more poignant to me, ever more reality to me. And that film, I think, was quite interesting because these sort of initiatives are really beginning to spring up. But one of the things that we've looked at here is looking, and Tatiana Schreiner again has created a directory of all the things that are actually happening. And this is an immensely valuable tool in this book to really look at where the information is, where the knowledge is going, where the connections are and where they are not. And looking at these adaptation plans, and through this chapter and the next chapter, can we just have that one as well? Next slide, please. It's sometimes tech is seen as not as important as it might be, but data, information turning into knowledge, turning into our ability to manage this, to look at health, to look at skills, to look at metrics and see that we can actually adopt a risk management approach. Learning from what we did in the knowledge cities, when we transformed many cities, such as Manchester, where I work, from a post-industrial city to a vibrant knowledge economy and a knowledge city. We need to be able to use that knowledge to do the same again. And we've seen many examples there. There are many examples in this book which really, really speak to this ability to use knowledge. And next slide, please. Apologies, I should have moved on to this one. But just again, to reiterate the complexness of the problem, the interconnectivity of it, and well, I think that the book in every shape and form begins to really help us see where there are ways through for the future. But knowledge, information data turning into knowledge and understanding and driving skills can be really important. Next slide, please. So the biggest challenge is, as we've heard in the audiobook, is to really get what we might call deep innovation. We need to change our systems. We need to beginning to look at policy and practice as well as data and information. We need to have significant change, as we've heard in the previous book, in our underlying paradigms, not only of economics and policy, but of urban life itself. And we are driven by a challenge between our philosophy of individualism and communitarianism. And Daniel talked about the commons, the global commons, very much coming through in this book also, but the commons in the city. And we become culturally attuned to working on the basis that the earth and human resources are unlimited. But as Elinor Ostrom noted, we need ecological and social connections. Innovations where alternatives to monetary value in urban economics, such as, next slide please, such as knowledge markets, such as the value-based exchange, such as from, Javier knows this, from crowd dealing to cooperatives, alternative banking, open knowledge, and redefining financial capital as a means and not in an end. I was very struck by a comment made by Mark Carney, who was ex-banker, ex-chair of the Bank of England, who said that how come Amazon is one of the most valuable companies in the world, where the Amazon has no value attributed to it until the trees are cut down and the land is turned into farmland and we produce stock on it. We need to change this. And debates on public versus private spaces in urban areas come very common in these chapters. And the next slide, please. But part of our big challenge is that we are where we are. We are where we are. We have many challenges currently in our cities. We have inequalities. We have labor migrations into cities. We have so many of Paul Agne's fictitious commodities with extremes, which is set out in these chapters, of building homes for the rich in bunkers, homes for the rich in the sea, basically acquiring these commons for their own good through the money which they have. A real challenge. And in Africa, the relocation through migration is bad at the moment. But if the Sahel goes through a climate drought, the number of people who will be forced out of their land, I think many of you may have heard that Madagascar is currently labeled as the first climate famine. This is real. This migration will happen. And in Africa and Asia, we have one of the most rapid growing populations. And we have so many cities growing with informal settlement and migrant settlement. Next slide, please. And you just need to look at the potential difference that we might have in our cities if we look on this ground as public and common good, or we look at the divided and inequality that we can see in all our cities. This one is an example in South Africa. So we have to have the ability not only to look to the future, but to deal with the problems that we have currently in our cities. So preparing for the future gives us the opportunity to recognize these challenges and to begin to deal with them. Now, the final two contributory sections that I'm going to talk about, next slide, please, is about urban futures and really interesting aspects coming through from many different directions here. And the next slide, please, as well. Next slide, please. And how we reimagine the city. And if we can move on to the next slide, please. I just think these two sections gave me hope beyond everything. These were about local people examining the challenging elements that we've seen in the other chapters, but taking actions. And if any of you were able to join the seminar we had last night, we saw a number of these things. So Raphael in France and Lorena in South Africa beginning to address local actions, which from the bottom up, we've got fantastic case studies in these last chapters, from Germany to Ghana, from New York to Paris and well beyond. From moving from informal spaces following disasters to youth engagement and moving beyond campaigning to doing. The value of recognizing the urban commons and their use for growing food, supporting nature, and also underpinning the human values and relationships. And several key words resonate for me in these chapters: ecosystems, resilience, learning and knowledge, Ubuntu, shared spaces, shared values and practices, regenerative approaches, recognizing that we do have these challenges in the here and now. But if we use a regenerative approach, we can actually also be lining up for what is to come. Coping and solving on the ground, values way beyond just money. And all these are available to us now. We just need this understanding and knowledge to be moved into action on the ground. I believe that this volume, with its multidisciplinary views and range of topics, insights and examples, will help us to move in that direction. It won't be the cure, but it can contribute in a big way, because it really opened my eyes. It really makes me think. And I hope that anyone who reads it will also be challenged by those thinking. Final slide, please. One of the great things that this book has made me do is to read much more of things that I have never come across before, like The Great Transformation by Karl Polanyi, a sensible and pragmatic thinker, and aligned with K4A book, Knowledge for the Anthropocene book, aligned with them, you see the same things that we need for a significant and just transition from where we are now in cities. With value-driven changes, we need to reconstitute our economic models in service to life and nature, deal with our social inequalities and those vulnerabilities, get them recognized and get them addressed. Try to collaborate. I mean, okay, we've got global governance, we've got national governance, we've got local city governance, and from the bottom up, we've got action. We need those all to come together. And environmental restoration, valued for its own contribution, for its own value, not being commoditized and sold. Knowledge-based approaches which are multi-level and deal with this complexity. I think the reason I wanted to show you the digital twin was it's something completely new to me. I never heard of it before, but that they wanted to put that film out so that they could begin to show the impact in reality and people's lives if they don't collaborate, if they don't join up the systems. And technology can be a part of this, although it's costly. It can be a tool. Nature-based knowledge and solutions, as we've seen in many of the presentations. And really importantly, behavioral change. I hope everyone now will go and buy carbon neutral slippers, like Grandad in the picture, who didn't believe in climate change, who didn't believe that the rain that was falling was going to affect him, his family, his house. And there were skeptics mentioned in that film. So my conclusion from this book is we must enable and call for collaboration, cross-scale coordination, community awareness, and above all, action. Thank you all very much. I hope that you have found that remotely interesting, or more than remotely interesting. Thank you very much. That's the start to finish.
Well, thank you, Günter and Cathy, for this wonderful session. And I invite everyone to look into the Edward Elgar Publishing landing page. You have access to an official web page for each of the volumes. And from there, you can download an e-leaflet. You can look at all of the contributors, and you can look at the table of contents. And hopefully you may also be interested, of course, in acquiring the volume, perhaps in the digital version, which is far more accessible. Well, congratulations and to the whole community, international community, who has participated in producing these two volumes. And hopefully, basically, in the end, this helps everyone to move into the direction of becoming more conscious and more engaged, actively engaged into responding to knowledge for the Anthropocene and into preparing our cities for the climate emergency. Thanks, Günter and Cathy, and thank the whole WCI community.